When I was in the 3rd grade, I thought that I was gay, cause I could draw. My uncle was, and I kept my room straight. I told my mom, tears rushing down my face. She's like, Ben, you've loved girls since before pre-K. Trippin'. Yeah, I guess she had a point, didn't she? Bunch of stereotypes all in my head. I remember doing the math, like, yeah, I'm good at Little League. A preconceived idea of what it all meant. But those that like the same sex had the characteristics. The right-wing conservatives think it's a decision, and you can be cured with some treatment in religion. Man-made rewiring of a predisposition, playing God. Oh nah, here we go. America the brave still fears what we don't know. And God loves all his children. It's somehow forgotten, but we paraphrase a book written 3,500 years ago. I don't know.
And I can't change, even if I try.
Atlanta, a city, a home, a backdrop to one of the largest LGBT movements in the United States. But as vibrant as the city has become, it still holds a complex history. Located in the heart of the Bible Belt, the prominent LGBT community provides a stark contrast when compared to many of the views held outside of the city. With origins in the Southern Confederacy and anti-gay legislation dating back as far as the 1800s, Atlanta has since parted from its historic roots and grown into a welcoming community, especially for its LGBT citizens. Despite the accepting nature and growth of the culture, Atlanta still lacks the national recognition it deserves. This is due in part to the controversial and defamatory nature of the past, which the South as a whole has struggled to move on from.
Once again, a bomb in the night.
Late today, Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed apologized to the men who sued the city after a police raid on the Atlanta Eagle Bar last year.
This reputation brands Atlanta with the homophobic views of its surroundings. However, the city has emerged as a bright spot in its separation from the culture that has plagued its history and surroundings. Atlanta's coming out has been a long journey, one with its downfalls and upswings, but the community has never stopped fighting for the recognition it so rightfully deserves.
And I can't change, even if I try.
Georgia's history of anti-LGBT treatment dates back as far as its creation, with Georgia's first anti-sodomy laws having been established in 1817. Sodomy typically refers to the act of oral or anal sex, but its definition is often left to the discretion of the law. Until as recently as 1998, sodomy in Georgia of any kind was punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Under the same law, the United States Supreme Court had affirmed just 12 years earlier. Georgia was one of the last states to invalidate its anti-sodomy laws before the United States Supreme Court deemed them unconstitutional across the country. The use of the law to enforce anti-LGBT ideas has been a staple of Southern culture throughout history. Outside of the law, the culture itself surrounding the LGBT community has not always been one of tolerance and vibrancy. The Southern Bible Belt culture can be seen infiltrating the outlook of Atlanta.
And then also one of the things that is different in Atlanta than from places like New York and San Francisco is that we are in the Deep South, we are in the Bible Belt, and that's always been a factor. And it's been really gratifying to me to see how much things have changed, because I remember when I first, visited here in 1971, the churches were a lot more prominent.
And yet, the culture has prevailed.
It was hard to be gay, and not really desirable to be openly gay. I remember that in '72 we were organizing the Pride March, and we went to 2 different gay bars, the Cove and the Sweet Gumhead, to leaflet about the Pride March, and we were thrown out of both bars for coming to leaflet about the Pride March. And the Cove was really violent, I'll never forget like standing in the parking lot, and I knew we had been told that if we go to these two bars, they're going to throw you out. So I thought, I'm not going to be thrown out of a gay bar. I'm not going to have that experience. So I volunteered for parking lot duty to patrol the parking lot, but I'll never forget standing in the parking lot and seeing one of my friends, one of my brothers, go flying through the air because he came into the bar and he was leafleting about pride, and they picked him up and they threw him through the air into the parking lot on the pavement. And luckily he didn't, break his neck or anything. So there was a real reaction against Pride Month, because before that there was the Mattachine Society and the lesbian organization Daughters of Bilitis. And one of the interesting things about that is that you can't tell from the names of those organizations, the Mattachine Society and the Daughters of Bilitis, that the LGBTQ organizations, and that was deliberate because there was so much harassment. And also the police and the post office even was harassing people for sending things through the mail. So when they said Mattachine Society, that was based on court jesters from the Renaissance. And Daughters of Bilitis, that was the whole name they completely made up. And that was a way for them to avoid being persecuted.
Hate, however, has changed its form. Although the systematic discrimination against the LGBT community has been minimized, acts of hate have prevailed through modern times. The Orlando shooting reminded many in the LGBT community of the often overlooked bombing that took place in 1997 at the Other Side Gay and Lesbian Bar and Lounge. Although none were killed, this act signifies a time of terror in the LGBT community amongst the period recognized as a turning point for progress. One of the most notorious acts of discrimination against the LGBT community in more modern times was the Atlanta Eagle Raid. In 2009, the Atlanta Eagle Gay Bar was raided by police in a futile effort to catch patrons in the act of, quote, lewd conduct. In addition to never having obtained a warrant, police unconstitutionally searched and recorded every person at the bar that night, many of whom later went on to fight the unjustifiable action in court. Sadly, occasions like this were not all that unlikely until many years later.
I would say that for a long time, the attitude of the police was that they could kind of do whatever they wanted in terms of gays and lesbians. And so it was always kind of like when you went out, you kind of crossed your fingers and crossed yourself that you would get caught up in a raid, this kind of raid out of nowhere that might happen. And I have a good friend, Winston Johnson, who knew Mrs. King really well, became a good friend of Coretta Scott King. And he talks about a raid on the Animals Bar in 1978, which no longer exists, the bar called Animals. But how he and his partner got entrapped in that raid and had a big court case, and he was being charged, with lewd behavior, and it wasn't true. And that's always, I mean, that's gone for a long time.
The Eagle Raid was just pathetic and horrifying, and I think it wasn't until, after everything about it really came out that you could see how bad it was that this was allowed to happen. And then he bombed the Other Side Lounge, which was a lesbian bar in Atlanta, and at that point, our community was really locked down. We had a giant meeting at Outright. The next day after it was organized by the mayor, and the entire community came together, and at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning we were packed at Outright Bookstore. I was really brought into it to really get involved at that point. We had to watch our backs every day after that. We had heavy security at the store. Every Pride, every big event, we had to have extra security. We trained our people to look at every backpack and watch outside the store. Every 2 hours for 15 years, we had patrols that went around the store to make sure there was nobody trying to target us or harm us. And in all those years, we had, I think, 1 or 2 rocks thrown through a window. So I think we did pretty damn good. I've never had death threats or anybody harass me. I really put on a strong face when I opened the store. I would say that after the Other Side bombing, one night I got really scared. There was a story on one of the news stations that a hate letter had come, not to us, but to the community from an address that was directly across the street from the bookstore. And I went into a panic. I don't think I slept for 2 days. And I was just terrified of when are we going to be blown up?
The community, despite this persecution, moved forward, carrying the rest of Atlanta and the South into modern times.
All throughout the South and all over the country now too, but especially in the South, that it was a place where people could come and really be themselves and be free and have a full life and have a social life and be part of a larger community. And that wasn't true almost everywhere else in the South, maybe in New Orleans, but not really hardly any other place. And so it's always been a place for people to come and say, okay, I can come out and I can have a full life and I can fully be myself and I can live freely and fully. And you know, again, they've always talked about Atlanta being the city too busy to hate.
While in today's society, LGBTQ+ culture has entered the mainstream, gay marriage wasn't legalized across the country until 2015, demonstrating the shocking growth and acceptance of the community.
This morning, the Supreme Court recognized that the Constitution guarantees marriage equality. In doing so, they've reaffirmed that all Americans are entitled to the equal protection of the law. That all people should be treated equally, regardless of who they are or who they love.
By the power recently vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you married. Congratulations. Kiss, please.
The White House is shining a colorful light on same-sex marriage. It was lit up like a rainbow last night. The overnight show was in celebration of yesterday's U.S. Supreme Court ruling to legalize gay marriage nationwide. And celebrities are also reacting to the decision. We have much more on that coming up.
I felt like it was my fault.
Why am I ashamed of who I am?
I'm not passing as anything, I'm being.
Because I'm tired of hiding. And I'm tired of lying by omission.
However, the attitude surrounding homosexuality and anything else of the sort has not always been this way. In fact, before 2015, LGBT people were granted hardly any rights or recognition, facing adversity all throughout history in the eyes of the law and society. According to the Pew Research Center, the public opinion did not shift in favor of gay marriage until 2011, proving the drastic change that has occurred in less than a decade. Although the attitude across the nation has changed, prejudice and hate are still practiced in many parts of the country, especially the South. However, in spite of almost every contradictory sign, from the Bible Belt to bombings, Atlanta has made a name for itself amongst the LGBT community, one of respect and notoriety. Unlike many other LGBT hubs, Atlanta has had to fight hard for its position in the community, and it is all due to the culture too busy to hate. Figuratively, socially, and politically, Atlanta has acted as a bubble in the most unlikely of places. It has emerged as a canvas for the culture that shapes the city into what it is today. Both politically and perceptually, Atlanta shields its LGBT community from the animosity of its surroundings. Major cities are often the most progressive parts of a state, and Atlanta is a powerful example of how a city can rise up for justice even in the heart of the South. While Georgia continues to contemplate anti-LGBT legislation and policy, Atlanta has been a progressive force to be reckoned with, protecting its citizens and fostering an attitude of acceptance and belonging. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Georgia is one of 3 states that does not have an explicit anti-discrimination law that protects members of the LGBT community, and ranks second in occurrences of LGBT workplace discrimination. Meanwhile, Atlanta first instituted protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation in 2000 and has earned a perfect score for the past 3 years on the Human Rights Campaign's Municipal Equality Index, which measures the support a city provides to its LGBT residents in terms of non-discriminatory laws, municipal services, leadership on LGBT equality, and many more factors that judge the progress and general attitudes surrounding LGBT culture.
It is, as we often say, Atlanta is a bright blue spot in a very red state. And so Atlanta, well before my time, has always been a place where LGBTQ people could come to from all over the South when they left home, and far too often when they were thrown out of their homes, they were able to come to Atlanta and be themselves.
Atlanta has always demonstrated itself as a city dedicated to inclusion and equality. Atlanta elected the first openly gay city council president in the country, and Georgia's General Assembly holds the most LGBT representatives in the South, due solely to those elected in the metro Atlanta area. First popularized by the civil rights movement, Atlanta has been known as the city too busy to hate. The LGBT community has adopted this phrase in its efforts to prove to the world that Atlanta is not represented by the culture of its surroundings or commonly held misconceptions. Instead, the community has been fighting for decades to show the world the progress it has achieved in transforming a city of the Deep South into a hub for the vibrant culture it encompasses. Atlanta has been continuously ahead of the curve when it comes to advocating for and promoting the equality of LGBT people. John Lewis, a civil rights icon and congressman from Georgia who currently represents the city of Atlanta, has served 15 terms as a long-term supporter of LGBT rights and has openly spoken up against the mistreatment of the community.
I fought too hard and too long against discrimination based on race and color, not to stand up and speak up against discrimination against our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. I see the right to marriage as a civil rights issue. You cannot have rights for one segment of the population or one group of people and not for everybody. Civil rights and equal rights must be for all of God's children. No government, state or federal, have the right to discriminate against someone because of the color of their skin or sexual orientation. I see marriage equality as a step, a necessary step in completing the long, hard struggle, what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community, where we will lay down the burden of prejudice and just let people love each other. That's why I'm a Southerner, for the freedom to marry. I look forward to the day, not just in the state of Georgia, but all across the American South and all across our country, when the question of being free to fall in love and marry whoever you please will no longer be an issue. And that day will come. It will come in America in our lifetime.
You have to stand up, speak and speak out, and find a way to get in the way and to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. You and I are partners. We are part of an ongoing struggle to redeem the soul of America. I got arrested and went to jail 40 times during the 60s. Beaten, left bloody, unconscious, but I got up and I never gave up. You must not give up. We are working to build what Dr. King called the beloved community, so we can leave a legacy of love, unity, and peace.
Atlanta has set the example for LGBT communities everywhere of how to grow and succeed despite the adversity they may face. Emerging as a leader on the national level in acceptance and vibrancy, Atlanta has discovered its unique identity that it is finally coming to terms with.
Los Angeles or New York.
I would have to say like hip hop maybe, and then like civil rights, because like I feel like that's like a main thing that started here.
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Well, I think there are lots of many different pockets, many different flavors that make up Atlanta's culture, and I think to narrow it down to one particular group would be unfortunate. But at the same time, I think unfortunately there still is, it's not as integrated as I'd like it to be.
I think of, honestly, hip-hop. The hip-hop scene is growing a lot. Diversity, definitely, and football.
It is him, my
While Atlanta's LGBT community and culture easily compare to that of San Francisco and New York City, Atlanta often receives less recognition as an LGBT hub, largely due to its location in the South, amongst other constraints. While San Francisco and New York City are located in relatively progressive states, Atlanta has had to prevail over the prejudice faced in Georgia. While the state actively tries to discourage the openness and recognition of the LGBT culture it contains, it makes it more difficult for Atlanta to be seen with open arms, welcoming of all as it should be. Atlanta has the power to help the many people who feel lost due to their sexuality. However, many are not even aware of the home that this city has to offer. This is due to the lack of recognition it receives on the national stage. Atlanta has been, is, and will forever be a home to the outcasts of the South, those who are pushed away from their families and communities due to something that cannot be changed. In order for LGBT people to finally find comfort and safety in the harsh environment of the South, Atlanta needs the recognition it so rightfully deserves to continue to grow and thrive. The importance of Atlanta's recognition cannot be understated. Without it, most in the LGBT community of the South would feel lost, trapped in the intolerance encompassing the region. Atlanta continues to stand strong, but its future relies on its perception as a home, as a bubble, as a safe haven, and as a city too busy to hate.